honorable guests, friends, family, and colleagues of Professor Holtzhausen, a very warm University of Pretoria welcome to all of you. Welcome to this prestigious event whereat Professor Holtzhausen will deliver her inaugural lecture. A very special word of welcome to our Vice Principal, Professor Loretta Ferris, to Ambassador Mohammed Ali Mire, the Somali Ambassador to South Africa, and to Ms. Kadiboni Diale, the Gauteng MEC for Transport and Logistics. It is now my privilege and my pleasure to introduce to you our Vice Principal Academic, Professor Loretta Ferris. Prof. Ferris was appointed as Vice Principal Academic at the University of Pretoria on the 1st of July in 2022. She was previously the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Transformation, Student Affairs, and Social Responsiveness at the University of Cape Town. Before that, she had joined the University of Pretoria as a Professor of Law in the Faculty of Law here at this university. She held numerous leadership roles at UCT, including being the Director of the Institute of Marine and Environmental Law, the Director of Research at the Faculty of Law at the University of Cape Town. Prof. Ferris has 28 years of experience as an established scholar with international standing and commendable scholarly work. She holds a doctoral degree in the environmental law from the University of Stellenbosch. Prof. Ferris is a member of the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Academy of Environmental Law. She has served as an expert in the United Nations Environmental Problems Montevideo process. Prof. Ferris serves on the board of BioWatch and is chair of the Board of Natural Justice, both of which are civil society organizations with a strong focus on environmental justice. I now call upon Prof. Ferris to introduce Professor Natasja Holtzhausen.
Our speaker, Professor Natasja Holtzhausen, members of the University Executive and Senior Management, including the Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Management Sciences, Professor Margaret Chitika Mabuga, His Excellency Mohammed Mire Ali, the Somali Ambassador, former South African Ambassador to Indonesia, Dr. Hilton Fisher, Gauteng MEC Kadiboni Diale, colleagues from the Faculty of EMS, as well as colleagues from other faculties, students from this university, family and friends of Professor Holtzhausen, and I hope you're all sitting, well, you are all sitting, because this is a long list of friends and family. Her sister, Professor Tanya Maria, and her husband, Peter Maria, and their children, Latahan and Reza. Her father, who could not make it this evening, but is in his absence represented by Peter Holtzhausen. School friends, Alida van Sail and Jacques de Prier. Tanikei, Karen Skuman, who was not only a teacher at her former high school, but also one of her late mother's best friends. The Van Dyck family, Ferdi, Antoinette, and Professor Gerda van Dyck. The Vandenberg family, Betsy and Dr. Eliza Vandenberg. The Lambert family, especially Dr. Keith Lambert. The Toy family, especially Dr. Dion de Toy, who she says is a rock. Colleagues and friends from university all over the continent. Her closest friend, Lorinda and Johnny Maria. Good evening and welcome. I consider it an enormous privilege to welcome you all today on behalf of the University of Pretoria on this auspicious occasion of the inaugural lecture of Prof. Holtzhausen. The ceremony of an inaugural lecture is a celebration. It's a celebration of a colleague's appointment to the position of professor. It is the highest point of academia. It's therefore an occasion of great significance in the career path of an academic, and it should be celebrated. as it is clearly by your presence here this evening. But also, of course, for the university, it's an occasion to showcase and to celebrate the university's pride in the achievements of its academic staff. We're always proud to host the inaugural lecture, as it provides yet another moment to reveal our extensive knowledge pool and the excellence in research, in teaching, in learning, and in innovation. As a university, we strive to be an institution that makes a difference, that does groundbreaking research through disciplinary and transdisciplinary research, and that also through our teaching and research address the challenges, the many challenges that face our society, our country, and really even the world. And I think this evening's address speaks to that endeavor. At present, we know that in recent years, corruption in South Africa has taken on widespread proportions. We can almost say that it has become a pandemic. In a recent opinion piece, Professor John Mubangisi, who is the Dean of Law at the University of the Free State, reminded us that where corruption is rampant, there are deteriorating institutions and diminishing public trust in government, which impairs the ability of government to fulfill its obligations and to ensure accountability in the delivery of economic and social services. So in view of this statement, and no pressure, Prof. Holtzhausen, but we do look forward to this lecture that is titled From Corruption to Correction, Pipe Dream or Possibility. So without further ado, allow me to introduce Professor Holtzhausen. Natasja Holtzhausen is a full professor at the School of Public Management and Administration. She has a BA degree in political science, a BA honors in public administration, an MA cum laude in public administration from the University of Pretoria, and a D.Lit at Full from the University of South Africa. In addition, she completed a postgraduate certificate in higher education at this institution. She's the former chief editor of an accredited journal who pursues research related to organizational studies, ethics, corruption, whistleblower protection, community engagement, training and education in public administration, as well as the future of work. Natasja serves on a number of national and international bodies and editorial boards. She is regularly invited to speak at national and international events, as well as moderate and facilitate panels on a variety of topics. She's published in accredited national and international journals and contributed over 10 chapters to books and was the co-editor of a book. She has supervised a large number of postgraduate students to completion. She's a member of the Gauteng Ethics Advisory Council, appointed by the Gauteng Premier, where she is the workstream chair that focuses on the legislative framework, policy and systems, and was also a member of a reference group that developed the South African National Anti-Corruption Strategy and regularly trains public servants in all spheres of government. We're not yet done. In addition, she is actively involved in training academics all over the continent in matters relating to e-learning and facilitation. She's also the recipient of a number of awards, including a Teaching and Learning Achievement Award. In July 2020, Professor Holtzhausen was elected to represent Africa on the Board of Management of the International Association of Schools and Institutes of Administration, the IASIA. Natasja currently serves as the Interim Director of the Center of the Future of Work, which is one of the University of Pretoria strategic directives. And then finally, I asked her, well, this is the academic Natasja. Who is the real Natasja? And she says, well, she's a person that values friendship. And I think your presence here tonight is testimony of that. Over to you, Prof. Holtzhausen.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, family, and also members from academia all over the continent. I am honored to be here in front of you tonight. I would like to start off by just giving you a peek in terms of what my inaugural will focus on. So, as we've said, and I'm also fortunate to know Prof. John Mugambisi's wife, who is also in our fraternity, Betty. Strong institutions, and I think that is one of the most essential points in terms of how do we create an ethical public service. How do we try and eradicate corruption within our country? I do tend to focus a bit on the National Development Plan in my inaugural address, but then also specifically focus on the latest, the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, in terms of what was said and where are we now. And then also with saying that, my best wishes to those that need to implement that we have suggested in the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. It would be amiss if I do not refer to whistleblowing and the protection of those that disclose wrongdoing. One of my first loves would be organizational culture, and I really also think that that is an essential element. Linked to that, leadership. Then I also just throw a few thoughts out there in terms of the anti-corruption system, and then most importantly, what I think is the role of active citizenry and co-production. Now, I cannot stand in front of you without feeling a little bit emotional. So, in gratitude, I would not stand here if it had not been for many of you. My academic journey has been richly blessed with mentors and colleagues. I always jokingly say that I know everything about this business due to especially Professor David Fourie, who was my lecturer, later my master supervisor, and who saw potential in, I can't believe I'm so emotional, a young woman, and who chose to mentor her. Professor Valiant Clapper, in his absence, was a pillar when I started out as a young academic, uncertain in a changing world. Of course, Professor Christel Arjokom and Prof. Eddie Stroe, who acted as my thesis supervisors, and they had a profound influence on my thought process. And then also, probably, on the manner in which I supervise to this day. Thank you. You can see that I have friends in the audience. I have countless colleagues globally that has molded me and provided me with insights. My SPMA family, that is the foundation of me being here at the University of Pretoria, and then also I would have to mention my colleagues in the Centre for the Future of Work, which might seem a little bit off from the topic that I am talking about today. Prof. Gerda van Dijk, especially to you, Director of the School of Public Management and Administration, but then I have also known her since my undergraduate years. Although I may not always agree on matters relating to the discipline, I truly respect you, and I really appreciate your continuous support and encouragement. I'm really fortunate to also be able to thank colleagues all over the continent and internationally for consistent support, especially in a number of projects that I am involved in, especially the Pedal family, which will be watching this after tonight. To the many students and public servants that has allowed me to be part of their learning journeys, I do not have enough words to share my gratitude. My Dean, Professor Margaret Tutiga Mapugu, and then also the former Dean, Professor Elsbie Loots, who fought for me when they said they would do so. Thank you cannot express my sense of appreciation for what you have done for me and for your continuous support in whatever I get into my head to do. My sister, my father, and then her family. You are forever my heart. Ooh, I would not be here if it was not for your love. I'm fortunate, or would it be a challenging position to be part of groups that took up the call to fight corruption and protect especially whistleblowers? I would also like to welcome and thank members from the National Anti-Corruption Strategy reference group that is here, as well as those from specifically the Provincial Integrity Management Unit. This inaugural I do, however, dedicate to my students. Okay. The Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu said that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And that is the challenge that we face. James D. Wolfenson already said in 1996, let us not mince words. We need to deal with the cancer of corruption. We are many years from 1996, and we're still facing the cancer of corruption every single day. I cannot think of a person sitting here in this room who probably have not been exposed to some kind of corruption at one stage or another. I would choose to believe that you have not offered a bribe, but if you're a public servant, you might have been offered a bribe and hopefully also then declined it. The reality is that we are constantly bombarded with corruption, unethical behavior. We almost cannot keep up with what the narrative is. And I think in part, we also need to change that particular narrative. And that is also why I would argue that we also consider in celebrating those that are, for example, successfully prosecuted. Also, please bear in mind that corruption is not unique to Africa. It's not unique to South Africa. We have countries, even in Canada, stemming from a paper that I co-authored with Professor Treina van Niekerk and Professor Anay Laverco, where we actually then considered the similarities between state capture in Canada and also in South Africa. So even countries like Canada also are part of the scourge of corruption. Now, if we consider that South Africa has more than 17 pieces of legislation, we also have so many, including 7 anti-corruption bodies. We have constitutionally established bodies. Do we really need another body? Now, my opinion is no. We don't need another opinion in terms of do we need more commissions of inquiry. We need to get to the point where action speaks louder than words. But now we also need to ask the question that if we say we are taking agency, what do we mean by that? And there are a variety of definitions, which in practice basically also refers to the sense of control. If we look at the social sciences, of which we are part, agency is the capacity of individuals to have the power and resources to fulfill their potential. Now, in the end, we need to ask the question, are we giving away our power? Do we still have any power? And then also, what do we do in situations where government does not really share in the power? And you will see that through my address, I also consider specifically what is our role. So as citizens, you and I, together, what is our role? Can we truly sit back and expect government to keep on providing? And I know the argument will be made that we are taxpayers. They must do their jobs. But members of the audience, the reality is they're not doing their job. And we are all trying, but in the end, It should be an effort that we all buy into. So what do strong institutions look like? Now, in terms of strong institutions, we find that we work specifically within the Sustainable Development Goals. And those are areas that we need to focus on. But specifically in terms of my area, I focus on peace, justice, and strong institutions, asking the question, what would a strong institution look like? So what does it entail? What would be the core elements of that? Now, in a chapter also that was published in a book that was edited by Professor David Mello, we also consider various aspects relating to corruption, but also the manifestations of it. I should just maybe mention that I'm not going to go in a long discussion relating to the various pieces of legislation. That is a talk for another day. But then also just the purpose is to share with you what my journey has been and where we are. So I always would use the we. Why we? Because I firmly believe that the answer lies in we and not me. So, if the vision is to create a global society that is grounded in the rule of law, justice, equality, democracy, and good governance, it is imperative to consider the makeup of public sector organizations. So again, what do they look like? Specifically in terms of Target 5 and Target 6, how do we substantially reduce corruption? Dr. Renate Mpendu has actually written a whole thesis and also looked at the implementation of anti-corruption efforts, legislation, and that is in his PhD, if you want to go and read up on that, he's also here with us tonight. And they also focus on, and this is in line with what the SDG says, preventing, detection, investigation, and how do we sanction corruption. But then, and I think this is an important point, develop effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels. So what does accountability truly mean? And then, what would good practice be? And do we share the good practice, or do we always just focus on the negative aspects? So in order to ensure strong institutions, what would be the shared values? The codes of conduct. Now, a code of conduct is not enforceable. I also think that the solution does not lie within a code of conduct. It's in the end written information that is just there, and our public servants would sign it, the same with various declarations. So in the end, does it truly bring about change? And I think that is what we need to ask. If we consider policies, are they internally consistent? Working with whistleblowers, I have seen that there are a number of whistleblowing policies all over the country in the various departments. But are we actively and effectively implementing what we are saying in terms of these policies? What are the ethical challenges, and do we understand the ethical challenges? Do we have the same definition, so to speak, in terms of what would be considered a challenge? Professor Kanyani, in his book, he's also here, thank you, he provided us with case studies, and he called them ethical challenges, ethical dilemmas. What does that entail? How do we train employees? I always wonder, by the time that we get to the public servants, is it not too late to then think that we can train people to become ethical? And being ethical is critical in terms of creating less corruption, because we will never be in a corrupt-free society. And I know that is not what people want to hear, but how do we strive to get less corruption, or corruption that could be considered at an acceptable level, such as, for example, the Golden Girl, the Denmark Swedish. How can we get to that point? And then also, part of what they have is they have less legislation. And in South Africa, we have so many. And every time I turn around, there seems to be another piece of legislation that is coming our way. Are we truly listening to the people within our organizations? Those that are actively working with the public sector? Those that are working with the public? Do we truly understand what they are struggling with? And then what happens with non-compliance? Now, starting at the National Development Plan, we have not that many years left to achieve what the National Development Plan set out to achieve. Now, what I would like to highlight specifically is the capable developmental state. Now, I know many of our academics here probably do not want to hear the word developmental state by this time, because it's been oversaid over and over again. But in the end, a developmental state, and this relates to what we are still struggling with, is leadership, sound policies, skilled managers and workers, those lines of accountability. What are the appropriate systems? Are we fairly applying the different rules? And then again, and my colleague, Dr. Mary Mangai, also focused a lot in terms of active citizenry. And then what does it look like? And how do we get people to be actively involved? Now, the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. In terms of its pillars, and I think most people should be familiar with this. As you can see, already, strategic pillar number 1 speaks to a lot of what I think is important. To promote and encourage active citizenry, whistleblowing. So yes, we do not want people not to blow the whistle, but to blow the whistle in a manner where they will be protected. And I will get to those terms. Professionalization, a framework was just called out. And I'm not going to go into too many detail, but also I would like you to also just focus in terms of protecting those sectors that are truly vulnerable and that are really prone to corruption and unethical practices. This also goes back to, in government, the procurement system, which, as you probably heard, in GIAC is fortunately or unfortunately part of my portfolio. How do we create a procurement system that is, again, not corrupt-free, but safeguards whatever is happening? I should maybe just mention that we have all seen with COVID-19 that corruption just went through the roof. If it was possible, it literally went through the roof. Whistleblowers. Let's talk about the disclosure of wrongdoing. Now, one of my favorite quotes will always be, just because they pass a right to rat law, it doesn't make ratting any less obnoxious. So why do we sit with those perspectives? Because if you think about it, a whistleblower is seen as a rat, a snitch, and stitches for snitches. We are told as children, and we teach our children, not to tell tales. Not to if you see something, keep it to yourself. And I think in that is part of the narrative that we need to start changing. Whistleblowing, and I really like this also, it's about the basic issues. It is about human activity, so our activity. It covers loyalty. The loyalty in terms of the organization, the loyalty that you have towards your fellow employees, or the loyalty that you have to the employer, but also the loyalty that you have to your family and also to yourself. Because the reality is that in South Africa, we know what is the fate of whistleblowers. It often leads to them being killed. And we have seen it, it's been publicized wildly. But how do we change that? And that is why I also do not particularly like the word whistleblowing. And I know there's no such word as a disclosurer, but I would rather prefer a word like disclosurer, and I have been arguing for that since my PhD in 2007 at UNISA. This is also where the public and the private interests meet. Please always remember that it takes two to tango. There has to be somebody that would, for example, offer a bribe and somebody that would take the bribe, but then also somebody who could ask and give. So please be mindful of that. So why do we need whistleblower protection? Because it's literally sucking South Africa dry. Nepotism. Tenders, tenderpreneurs. Those are concepts that we actually should not have within our vocabulary. Corrupt officials, and then also corrupt leaders. What would our leaders look like in terms of if they set the example? Because that is the example that we have to follow. An organizational culture. And I would also like to mention now without tears that my journey in terms of my master's degree with Professor Fourie was on organizational culture. And it you know, after a PhD or a master's, you think you're done with a particular topic, and organizational culture keeps on popping up. Now, I see organizational culture as the heartbeat of the organization. It's basically the personality of a particular organization. We have the definition from Shine, and I think that we cannot consider anything relating to organizational culture if we don't consider that perspective. So those basic assumptions. It's assumptions that we share within our organizations. So whether you are at UP, or you're a public servant, or you're at any other higher education institution, doesn't matter where you are. What do you think is the culture and the organizational culture of your particular organization? Do you think that there is corruption? Can you identify unethical behavior? Is it a place where you want to be? Is it a place that you like to be associated with? Would you say, you know, if people ask you, where are you working? Or can you truly say, you know, so unfortunately we know that with a number of state-owned enterprises, and I'm not going to look at the people that I know are from the SOEs in the audience, you know, but I also have to say that those that are here, they are not part of the problem that we have, you know. But what does an ethical organizational culture looks like? What is your work environment? What are the expectations that you have, the experiences, and again, the assumptions that we add and the presumptions? An ethical organizational culture is doing the right thing. And if we consider doing the right thing, is that institutionalized? Or is corruption, which is systemic in my opinion, has that become the institutional or organizational culture? How do we deal with corrupt people, employees, employers? Do we actually do something, or do we just hide it in just another committee or something that will investigate, so to speak? You know, an inquiry or a commission is a good thing, but if we have commission on commission on commission, we're back to, again, the National Development Plan that called for certain things, and they still have not been achieved. Do we have a culture of integrity? Which means basically, do you do what you say you would do by the time you said that you would do it? Do you stand in integrity? Do you stand in authenticity? This brings me to the point in terms of leadership. Now that NDP, and I want you to, I'm going to read this to you because I am going to come back to this. Imagine a South Africa where we bring together visionary leadership, where our leaders' wisdom is ours, because we sense our wisdom in theirs. They do more than respond to us. They bring new thoughts and ideas. They share with us what they think. They inspire us, because we then seek to aspire with them. With them, we renew our world continuously. Bearing in mind, this is 2012. So, in terms of our leadership, do we really respect our leaders that we have within our organizations today? Do they lead by example? If you're in a management position, do you lead by example? Again, the ethical code of conduct that could be just on paper, do you actually live those values? Can we see that? Are you concerned about the self, me, or others? In the end, we serve the public. We serve a particular community. It does not matter where you are. And then, how do we lead with values? We know that by now, leaders and leadership must demonstrate integrity. And Martin Luther King said, the time is always right to do what is right. So yes, corruption is rife. Our organizations are suffering. But in the end, it's never too late. It always takes just one person. When I work with departments in terms of whistleblowing and the policies, I always share with them, it just takes one. Those brave individuals, small group of people, like Margaret Mead would have said. And then, do we stand up for what is right? But if our policies and legislation, and we went through this exercise with the Gauteng province specific in the Premier's office, if we follow a policy that stems, for example, from an act, the Protected Disclosures Act, even the revised one, but it is still not working, why are we keeping on beating the same walls over and over and over again? It does not bring any solutions. So, can we say, well, our policy is in line with legislation, so we are covered? In the end, just considering the plight of, for example, those that disclose wrongdoing, the so-called whistleblowers, we can see that it is not working. So, therefore, please, no more legislation that will lead to policies that do not work. The anti-corruption system. Now, I can also keep you busy for a very long time in terms of what is in place. But I actually want to take you back to Chapter 10 of the South African Constitution. People always ask, what do we need to do? I'm like, it's simple. It's stated in the Constitution, which is the supreme law of our country, of South Africa. This is what public servants, and in fact, I believe, the citizenry should also strive for. And that includes professional ethics, the use of resources. How do we use the resources? We say we don't have enough resources, but then we have wasteful expenditure, unauthorized expenditure. Do we actively encourage our public to participate? Are they part of the process, and do we truly hold people accountable? So in the actual speech, I do argue for a zero tolerance policy. I am of the camp that believe in name and shame. And I know it's not in line with POPI Act, it's not in line with constitutional rights and everything, and I acknowledge that. But I want to make sure that we truly understand what we are talking about, and that we showcase those. We have the saying, we want to see people, Brenda, and I'm sorry, in orange suits. You know, we want to see people in orange, because that means that we are actually holding people accountable. And then we publicize the successes. We don't just only focus on what is negative. I also particularly like the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, because in it states that they focus on public awareness. How do we create awareness? How do we make sure that our citizens know their rights? Also, empower African civil society, which relates to what I have already said, our media partners. What is their role? Had it not been for the media, I suspect we would not know a lot of things that has happened in government. You know, we would probably not have known, and this is not the focus of my address, about a family called the Guptas, where a family managed to capture a whole country. Imagine that. Your family, my family, that we can capture a whole country. How did we allow that to happen? What about accountability? What about transparency? What should we do? Because remember, the legislation is in place, the policy is in place. But that just goes back to my point that it is not working. How do we monitor implementation? And yes, we have units specifically focusing on that. But in the end, we need to be mindful that it's merely a tick box exercise. So, in an ethical environment, those public sector values, those that are contained in the Constitution, should be part of each and every one of our values. So not just the public sector values, but our values. What is the infrastructure? What does it look like? Do you actually know? And I'm not talking about all the public administration colleagues here. Do you actually know how do you disclose a wrongdoing? Do you know that you could be protected? Do you even know that there is an anti-corruption structure in place? Trying and fighting very hard. Also considering the challenges that would be coming in terms of modernization, digitalization, and then Society 5.0. And that is basically the Japanese concept where we want to have smart people, smart citizens, they say in smart cities. At the Center for the Future of Work, we believe that we want smart citizens in smart sectors. And that means that whether you are in agriculture, you're in trade and industry, doesn't matter, but that you fully understand what that would entail. So getting to active citizenry and co-production. Back to the National Development Plan. Actively seeking the opportunities. Have you been part of those? Have you experienced the opportunities? How do we work together? And I firmly believe that success lies in the we and not the me, as I have stated earlier on. How do we advance our communities? And please don't think, but it's only me against them, so to speak. You have to start making a change in your circle of influence. Even a girl from Stilfontein can make a small contribution in terms of bringing about change. Holding people accountable. Putting them in those orange suits. Social activism, so that we can truly taste the fruits of a democracy, of a society that is, I'm not going to say, as I said before, corrupt-free, but that is less corrupt, because that's the best we can hope for, and that is still my opinion. So, the state cannot merely act on behalf of the people, and I started my address by saying that. You can't just sit back and say, well, we voted for them. You know, Kiriboni, Vicky, we voted for you, we want you. I'm putting now members on the spot. But you know what? I need to be active in bringing about change. Every single person needs to be active. In conclusion, I think about what I've read to you. Imagine a South Africa where we are all visionary, not just the leaders, in our various domains, where we share wisdom, insights, new ideas. So again, it is us, we, not me. We strive to inspire each other, and together we continuously build a stronger South Africa. So you're wondering, from corruption to correction, there are so many pieces of legislation, so many bodies involved. And I think we can get to correction. I really think that it is a possibility. But if we keep on thinking that it's government's responsibility, it will always remain a pipe dream. I thank you.
I would like to congratulate Professor Natasja Holtzhausen on this inaugural lecture. Your research field is of immense relevance to each and every one of us in this room. I was waiting, in fact, for the notification for load shedding, just to remind us how corruption has affected our lives. When I Googled the word cancer that you used at the beginning of your lecture, I got the following. It is a disease caused by an uncontrolled division of abnormal cells in a part of the body. Another definition said it is an evil or destructive practice or phenomenon that is hard to contain or eradicate. This does not give us much hope. In your address, you have described to us very clearly some of the sources of this cancer and its potential devastating effects on organizations, institutions, countries, and individuals. I believe, well, I heard you say that the individual costs of corruption are wrongly calculated. They are minimized, and therefore the individual benefits of corruption are highly valued. Therefore, we are sitting with wrongdoing and corruption. There is an incentive in our society to be corrupt. I heard you say as well that there are many policies and that there is no shortage of institutions of corruption in our country and even on the continental level. It is hoped that these policies and these bodies, which are well formulated in South Africa, will assist to expose the true costs of corruption and expose those individuals, thereby minimizing the benefits of corruption. Your lecture emphasized, to my ear, that in order to attain a world where the culture of wrongdoing is fostered and accelerated in our societies, we, together with government, need to work together. One of our jobs as academic institutions, and you as an academic, is of course to continually study and research how societies can achieve this co-production that you talked about. Where are we getting it wrong? Thank you very much, Prof. Holtzhausen, for an illuminating inaugural lecture. Thank you too to the formidable lecturers and professors, to the family members, to the friends, to the colleagues who have journeyed with you throughout your life until this point. Thank you for being here with us. We truly appreciate your presence. Finally, let me thank my Vice Principal Academic Professor Loretta Ferris for presiding over today's inaugural lecture. Thank you.